Hey, everyone. How is it going today? It's Monday. This is Banner and Backbone. I'm Nick Perro, joined by my co host, colleague, good friend, intelligently masculine young man, Shane Urick of the Firebrand Project. And today, it's Palantalk. It's Monday.
Palantalk.
Welcome to Palantalk, everyone. We
Welcome.
have a good friend of ours here with us, friend of the community, friend of lots of communities around here. And just like I said, good friend who's trying to work for and towards a better Ukraine, who is trying to free Ukraine from this Russian oppression. Slava Ukraine. And welcome, Cheech.
Hi. Welcome, everybody.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Cheech, for everyone in the audience so that they can get to know you a little bit? Because I know we know each other, but not everybody else knows you.
So, we were talking about this before we came on. Is how did I become interested in European history and also with Ukraine? And through my travels through the years, I do travel for work, and I've had an opportunity to go overseas several times. And one of the trips that I took overseas was actually it was over to Croatia. I went to Zagreb. And everybody says, why did you choose Zagreb? Well, it was part of Yugoslavia and formerly Yugoslavia. So I had an opportunity to see what it was, see there's certain parts of Zagreb that are the old city, as well as new. There's new construction that's going on. And then there's the Soviet bloc, literally the Soviet buildings that are there. So the interest that I had was seeing the difference in the architecture, but also to try to get an understanding of culture and the people there in Croatia. Had an opportunity to meet a few people. They were Russian, as a matter of fact. One of them was a bartender at a small pub that was attached to the hotel, which was a Hilton property. And we had started to have a discussion, and he spoke. His English was impeccable. I didn't have to worry about having to understand Russian. And we talked, and he said, he says, we have a lot of people from Russia that travel to other countries to work because you can't make money in Russia. So at least, in order to survive. So that was the impetus behind, where it started with Ukraine. And in fact, that is where I happened to meet my fiance. She didn't know it at the time. It was just over time, and through the years, I stayed in contact with her, and also with a couple of friends that I made that were Russians. A couple of them actually lived in Russia. So my interest in the culture and trying to get a basic understanding of the culture. And then what happened in February of 2022? In fact, it's coming up. March 24th is going to be 4 years.
Yep.
Of this current stage, the fight that Ukraine has had with Russia. This has been going on a lot longer than 20
since. People forget Crimea. People forget
even before Crimea, even before
the Budapest Memorandum, and all of the things that Ukraine, all of those things, right? Yeah, totally.
It goes back even further than that. It goes back into this. It's like 1670 something that Russia tried to gain dominance over Ukraine, and this is where Putin, in his mind, because he's a history buff.
Yes, the Russian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, he wants to be more of a czar than USSR.
So
he wants all of the Russian Empire,
all of it. And all these when the Soviet Union fell, and then these countries decided to gain their independence. The Baltic states, then you come down. You had Poland, you had Czechoslovakia, all that whole belt that comes down in and around Ukraine, and then also where Crimea is, and of course Crimea is where Sevastopol is, which was the major base for Russia and Ukraine.
What's their submarine base, I believe, for the
It's a Navy base.
Yep.
Navy base. So all of this anyway, you know, for me, I'll be honest, history in high school was my worst effing subject.
really.
European history. This is no lie. I had a teacher, and everybody laughs when I say this. His name was George Bush. And that's true. His name was George Bush.
Unfortunate name.
Yeah, we didn't know that. Fast forward.
Didn't they name just really interesting? I feel like they did. I want to make sure, but I'm pretty sure they named the next aircraft carrier like after Bill Clinton. Let me look at that. Anyway, keep going. Sorry, this just made me think.
To what I was getting at is, I had zero interest in European history. In fact, I took the last chair in the classroom, leaned up against the wall, and literally closed my eyes. And Mr. Bush says, "Mr. Previti, would you like to go to the library?" Sure. He gave me a pass to the library. That's when I decided, you know, that all right. So if I want to know something about European history, I want to do it on my own. It's not I didn't want a teacher reading out of a book. But again, fast forward to in 2022, and when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 24th, 2022, and I want everybody needs to understand that date is coming up fast. And now, 4 years later, where are we? Russia has only captured less than 12%. I mean, it's a very small portion of Ukraine, and primarily it's down around the Donbass region, which they've been fighting since 2014.
The fact that they still, and this is something that I think a lot of people miss. I think that, you know, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Cheech, but you know, my outlook on this and is the war has been going on almost 4 years, like you said here, right? And not only have they only captured 12%, but they've barely captured, you know, I can't tell you the exact percentage, but compared to what they had after those first months of 2022, following the 2023 counteroffensive that ultimately liberated, you know, all of that territory, I don't think people really appreciate how badly Russia has done over the last year and a half in particular. Like, look at Pokrovsk, right? They have yet to take Pokrovsk. They've said they've sat at the amount of humiliations of Putin making a public statement about, you know, the occupation for Pokrovsk. He said, bring in the international reporters. We've taken it. They still don't have it. Kupiansk recently, humiliation beyond anything you can imagine, where they actually drove them out. So yes, Ukraine suffers, but, you know, Russia's lost to casualties alone more than almost its entire standing army once over at this point.
Millions. And getting back to what you were saying, you know, where they thought they were going to come in and steamroll Kyiv in 3 days. You know, it sounds a lot like Trump saying I'm going to end the war in 24 hours. And
or like George W. Bush, we're gonna take Iraq in a day and then fucking sit there for 20 years.
20 years.
And do nothing other than create a mess.
So look at Afghanistan. So this is where even Russia, where they went into.
Don't go into Afghanistan. It ruins empires.
It ruined
the British Empire. It ruined the Russian Empire. It's ruined the U.S. Empire. Like,
white people should
Afghanistan ruins
out
empires.
of the Middle East. It never ends well for them, ever.
No.
Ever.
We haven't even talked about Vietnam. You know, so that's another great example of where we should never have been, was in Vietnam. The South Vietnamese people didn't want us there. Do you think that they really cared that you had the communism? They had zero concept about communism. The only people that cared were, well, let's start. It was France first, you know, that was there. And why? Because it was a colony. That's why. And what happens with colonies, colonialization, when you're dealing with an empire? British
Don't
Empire,
work.
one of them, they don't work.
Colonization doesn't work.
Yeah.
You mean what we're trying to do in Venezuela and Greenland and invade and then colonize?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. We're not good at empire building in the US.
Doesn't work.
I don't know if as we say that too, it's like, I don't even know if it's, I just don't think it works, because on a fundamental level, to colonize someone, you have to oppress them. And if you oppress them and their quality of life gets worse, they're going to revolt.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. What's interesting, I think, about where we are now, and, since we're on Palantalk, I'm going to make this connection, but the use of media, and the ability to engross individuals in, distractions. What it has done is it has lowered and lowered. And honestly, I don't know where the threshold is for people to see and begin to really feel oppression on the level, like in Russia, right? Like, they're very impoverished, but they are major alcoholism. The state provides fucking vodka, because they keep all these people hammered so that they don't revolt. It's the same thing with your iPhone or your Netflix subscription. I said this the other day with Melissa. It's like, oh, they're trying to give a man who shot a woman in the face immunity for murder because he's wearing a badge. Well, you could either deal with that, or you can go watch Friends and laugh. And that is the discuss, like the difference, right? Now for us, it's, probably some shitty gas station wine and Friends. But for them in Russia, it's vodka and straight pulls from the bottle. But the same exists in a situation where they don't have those things, where they actually have to work every day. They're already working every day, 12 hours a day, just to have what they need to live. The threshold for tolerance of oppression and hardship is much lower, right? And that's why colonization doesn't work. No. So I just wanted to point that out, because when we're talking about these things, understand that what we're going through here is a form of colonization.
It is.
We're being kind of, well, it is. We're being forced into, or relegated into, a lesser or subservient class to an emerging class that controls the government. And now people are starting to realize that, not unlike the oligarchs and Putin's regime.
So maybe you could say we're being Russified in the US with our governmental practices, where it's becoming oligarchic based and punishment based again.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it Russification, but I think it's a broader I think it happens in Russia, but it also happens elsewhere.
It's a supremacist mindset.
Yeah, it's a controlling colonizational mindset. Like, it's the idea of, just
so it's interesting.
It's manifest destiny.
When you have, I've had conversations with, of course, I said past tense. They're not my friends now, but in the past tense, the friends that I had in Russia, we have a discussion, and we're talking about money. And I said, you're in Russia. In fact, this particular person was in Kaliningrad. And I said, so you are there in Kaliningrad, which is where you have a nuclear sub base. That's where all your nukes are. I said, you're in an area that you think is safe. And she said, well, we don't talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about this. And this was right after Russia invaded Ukraine. And this is when they went into, what's it, Bucha, that Russia went into, the Russians went into, and it just totally destroyed everything. They were raping women. They were, Alexander talked about this too. And I said to this person, I said, do you see the news? And she goes, no, I don't watch the news. So I said, okay, I'm just going to send you something. And it was about the Russians invading. I said, this is what your Russian soldiers are doing. And she said, no, that's not true. That's propaganda. I said, propaganda, use your eyes. I said, this is, and look what's going on. I said, they're stealing toilets, for Christ's sakes, besides killing people. And literally they were taking wash machines. They were taking all these things out of the houses and loading them onto whatever vehicle they had and bringing them back over to Russia. But my point being is that because their media, they're filtered, it's state-owned television, which is where we're headed. And
yeah.
And I said, well, how do you get your news? So she has a VPN. I said, okay. So you do get outside news if you choose. Yes. She says, what you're telling me, she says, it's not. It doesn't happen. Our Russian soldiers would never do that. I said, okay, then. Then the subject turned towards she needed to get a new iPhone. I said, well, and that at the time they said, well, we're going to stop them from being able to buy certain technology. Not true. They can get the same technology that we can here. If they want a brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max, sure, no problem. All it takes is money. And that's what it is over in Russia. If you have the money, just like here, if you have the money, you can get whatever you want. So anyway, moving forward to where we are today, when you take a look at the history, and again, those of you that are here that read my Substack, you noticed this morning I put up 3 books that I talk about. I talk about War and Punishment. I talk about Bloodlands, and I talk about War that Bob Woodward wrote. Not that I'm a big fan of Woodward, but what he lays out is the path of where we were to where we are. Not exactly today, but it brings us up to and in the middle of 2024. Now, what's happening over in Ukraine today? We all read. Shane, you go on Telegram and read, and I'm sure Nick, you do as well. But when you read about Kyiv, there's still portions of Kyiv that do not have electricity. It's coming back. I think there's like 1,000 people that, and I say only 1,000. It's at one point there was like 600,000 people that didn't have electricity. Electricity is coming back. But what do they use for heat in these apartment complexes? So they have these heating facilities. They heat hot water that goes to these apartment complexes. What happens when they target the
heating facility itself?
They don't have heat.
It's thermal, right? So it's
Yeah,
thermal.
that's
So
thermal.
it'll freeze as well. So if you knock it off and you shut it down and it's winter, it freezes in the pipes and then it damages the pipes. So they need to go in and fix that too.
So I posted, I think on one of my Substack posts, I put up there, and it shows they were thawing out, the pipelines. But the reality of it is that that's what's happening in Kyiv. We're not even talking about the outlying areas, the smaller portions of Ukraine, some of the other cities.
Kharkiv, right?
Kharkiv is not small. Kharkiv is like the second largest city in.
Is it Kharkiv that's right behind the front, or is it there's one
5 miles away from the Russian border. So Belgorod is just over the Russian border. Yep. In fact, before the war, they travel back and forth between the two countries, and Kharkiv is the outlying parts of Kharkiv is there. And then you have the Sumy region, which is another difficult part of. Pardon me while I'm reading my text. That's being hit. And then you look at that whole line that goes all the way down towards the Donbass region, and then comes down towards Crimea.
Yeah, it's Kramatorsk right now that's getting fucking hammered because they're past. And a lot of people, I think, also what they don't understand is When you think of a drone, you think of, your DJI thing. It's got a battery. What the biggest and the best weapon on the front lines in Ukraine right now are fiber optic drones. So what that means is there's a difference between your drone that's running on a radio signal. And they do have a lot of jammers, right? If you look at a lot of Ukrainian vehicles, what you'll see on top are these big blocky, things. You're like, what the hell is that? They're drone jammers. So if it's flying on a frequency, but what Russia has done, both sides have done, and Ukraine still maintains a advantage over Russia in terms of drone quality. And that's thanks to the people of Ukraine and their ingenuity. And you have all of these small, individuals who are making, hundreds, thousands of drones a day. But these fiber optic drones, there is no way to jam them, to stop them. Your best bet is to take a stick with fucking net on it and swat it the fuck away from you.
To your point about the fiber optics, now I forget where I saw it, but there was a picture, maybe it was a video of the fiber optic cables that are.
Oh, I've seen it. Oh my God, it's awful.
It's like a spider web.
Yes.
And of course, the birds. What do you think the birds do? They're building that.
I think it's 6 million animals have died in Ukraine since 2022. I was reading about this yesterday, and they're birds. I was watching a video of, he was a young guy. He was a Ukrainian soldier, but because they also use the drone mesh. So it's that like thick plastic stuff that, they'll string up at a construction site sometimes. But the birds, they fly into the nets, and they have to use the nets, or a drone will fly into their fucking dugout and kill them.
Yeah.
But it's like, this guy, I mean, he was just talking about how, like, how many birds, they're like, he sees hundreds of dead birds, a week basically. And I think people don't appreciate as well the damage to the natural beauty and the environment in Ukraine and the billions of dollars it will take to clean up this war. And to make this landscape,
agriculture is one of the biggest export products they have. So I was just talking about this last night. Sunflowers. So they use sunflower seeds, and there's a company that's actually in Ukraine. It's a U.S. company that makes sunflower oil, and they export the sunflower oil to other countries. Now, this U.S. company actually was targeted by the Russians.
Yeah.
You read anything about that in the media? Zero, nothing. They also targeted the port in Odessa, where there was a storage tank that had sunflower oil. That sunflower oil leaked out into the Black Sea. What does that do to the environment? So there were birds that.
The environmental damage we never talk about.
Yeah. But
and on the agriculture, like you were just saying, the agriculture, the actual economic damage that will do, but just the damage to wildlife, like the amount of fiber optic cables and tiny little glass particles that are going to get ingested by animals, that are going to go into water systems and
look at the Black Sea.
Don't degrade. Like it's going to be a fucking mess. Like, plus just bombs exploding. One, that kills everything, including the flora and the fauna. And it leaves fallout that comes down. Two, that then later destroys other areas.
Yeah. I mean, Ukraine, they supply a crap load of wheat to countries that depend on the wheat.
Breadbasket of Europe, right?
And and now you got Russia that's targeting the ships that are trying to come into the port to load up with wheat, sunflower oil. And they're hitting these, and these are not Ukrainian flag ships. These are the flags on these ships are from other countries. And they've actually had people that have been killed that are on these ships that have been hit. So they're targeting and trying to put a stranglehold on the Ukrainian economy. And one of the places are the ports that are in Odessa. So, and I'm going to segue into another part of this, that why, where these ports are. when you look at a map of Ukraine, and you'll see where Moldova is, and then you'll see that border where Moldova and Ukraine is. There's like 2 or 3 bridges that go over from Odessa into Moldova. So they've been targeting those bridges as well, and of course what they're trying to do is to limit the amount of traffic between the two countries, but also to keep certain things being supplied to Ukraine. One of which is petrol.
Correct.
So because the majority of the country now is depending on generators for electricity, I'm hoping that they're going to transition more towards solar, but that is problematic in itself, trying to get supplies for that. But the fact that the petrol is in limited supply, it drives the price up. So now I think when I looked, I bought 2 generators for one for the house that I have in Odessa and another one for another family, and petrol, a gallon is, liter wise, it was $1.65 a liter. So when you do the math, I think it works out to be over $6.25 a gallon for petrol.
Sounds like California.
You can't run a generator 24/7.
No.
So there's the map. You see Moldova, kind of left center of it, and then you'll see where Odessa is. Now, you also see where the port function is, and yes.
You want me to change the layers for it? I can make it look, rather than this, I can actually make it.
Well, there's the other thing that I was going to point out too is all right. So that's a great shot right there. So you can see in relation to Odessa and where Crimea is, and when you're looking at Odessa, and then to the left of that is where you have, yes, it's beautiful. I mean, it's right there on the Black Sea. It's incredible. But you have the border between Ukraine and Moldova.
Yeah.
So what do you think is on that border between Moldova and Odessa? There's a little sliver, and it's not so little, but it's called Transnistria.
Yeah, and there's Russian troops there, and they've been there for years.
1,500 Russian troops.
Correct.
That are there. And they've just recently, I think within the last, I think I saw the news today or yesterday, that they've stopped. There's no longer there's shipments that can go into that Transnistria from Moldova or from Ukraine. So now they're landlocked. They have no way of getting supplies into that part of this little Russian enclave. My fear is that this is going to give Putin a reason to go into Moldova. That's my fear.
That's interesting because, there's a couple, and you mentioned an important thing as well, because it was back in November that they struck the rail line, one of the most important rail lines from Poland, and that goes into Ukraine,
Right.
between let me see here, Lublin and Warsaw. So this was one of the arteries, and yes, I'm using the word artery because an artery is something that moves a large volume.
Right.
Okay, this is the artery for NATO aid it's right there in front of you, right? So it's
right.
that big, it should be somewhere right there in the middle. But this particular one, Russian agents, they were Ukrainian nationals, but of course we don't underestimate the KGB and their ability to co-opt, a couple Ukrainians to go do something. This railway as well. And I think it's important that you mention Moldova and Transnistria, because you also mentioned Kaliningrad, which is really important as well, because there's something called the Suwalki Corridor.
Yes.
Okay? So this goes through Poland. And if Kaliningrad is basically stuck, I don't remember the history of how they got it, but basically it's a little area, it's a naval base, and it's cut off from Russia.
It was called Konigsberg, and this is right after World War II. So right after World War II, you can see where Kaliningrad is. At the very top of the screen, Kaliningrad, and and it was actually part of
Your top left, right there. You see it,
Yep.
Nick?
Yeah, top left. I'm pointing
Yeah.
finger.
Yeah.
Right there. You got it. So that, right, you got Poland on one side, you got Lithuania on the other side, you got Belarus on the other side, and that was called Königsberg prior to World War II, and then during World War II, when they decided to split up between the Russians and the different countries, that became a Russian enclave.
Yep.
Right
And
there.
so that Suwalki corridor, thank you for that. I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
the Suwalki corridor, there's two. So Transnistria is another way they can get troops in. But what's unique, obviously, people that Belarus is Russia. Okay, like let's just not like it's Russia.
Belarus is fully
is-
vassal state.
It's a client vassal state of Russia. Absolutely. So what there's the Transnistria option, which would effectively cut off Ukraine from the south west. And then if they were to go through the Suwalski corridor, they would cut off the entire Baltic. So zoom out for me, Nick,
You
and
see
just
where it
go
says,
up.
yeah,
Go up.
yeah,
Go up for me. So yep, a little more.
up above Lithuania. You see where Lithuania is?
There you go. That's perfect. So where you have Kaliningrad, where it was, and then if you go across that little bit of Lithuania, okay, and you seize maybe 10 square miles, and the justification would be we can't reach the Russians. There's Russian nationals. That's always the justification for Russia. There's Russian nationals, or Russian speakers, and it's in our constitution to protect Russians everywhere. If they do that and they take that corridor, the Baltics are entirely cut off. And there, what would happen in the Baltics is basically guerrilla warfare. They wouldn't be able to resist Russia in any effective capacity. So it would become a very kind of partisan resistance where you have small groups fighting. And I don't know what your take on this is, Cheech, but I have doubts that Poland would even intervene, or you would see NATO help of the Baltics.
So you were talking about, so when you see the border that goes up along where Vilnius is, right? So Vilnius, and then it goes up towards Latvia, and then the border stretches up to where Estonia is. And then it gets up to where St. Petersburg is, which is, by the way, that's one of Putin's hometowns. So you have those countries, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So all along that border, they've already fortified that border, and they put in not only fencing, but they've also put in the tank traps. What's the
dragon's teeth?
The dragon's teeth along that. So those three countries are getting ready for what they believe is going to be is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So then also Poland has also put in along their border with Belarus is that they fortified that border between Poland and Belarus. So they're very aware of what can happen. In my opinion, I think they're expecting that something will happen. And you also have, you go back to World War II, you see where Helsinki is, right? In Finland, up at the top. So during World War II, the Germans were in Finland.
Yes.
The Germans were in Finland. And then you'll see where Sweden is in relation. So that is why, we talk about NATO, and is NATO going to survive what Trump is doing? In my opinion, we don't need to call it NATO any longer. It's not going to be the North American Treaty, right? I mean, I say da. That's habit, by the way. That's not going to happen. So you're going to have all these countries they're ramping up. They're getting ready for it. And I also believe that where Kaliningrad is, Kaliningrad, I call it Kaliningrad. And when you come down, I think that's going to be the part that maybe, I didn't say it will be, it may be the area where you're going to see the first, if we get involved with trying to keep Russia out of the Baltic, it's going to start there. Because we're going to be aware of it. We meaning
you mentioned that actually, and you shared something with me the other day, and so you shared a great article from the Kiev Independent about the United States entering into looks like the finalization stages of a contract with a U.S. company called TechMet for access to the Dobra deposits, mineral deposits in Ukraine. Now, I'm curious. I was thinking about this. If this deal goes through, you might see a posture change again from the United States towards Russia. Because ultimately, the only goal the United States has had in Ukraine this whole time was to get access to the valuable materials in Ukraine. So I wouldn't be surprised if, when that deal goes through, the US suddenly changes its stance again because we're in this state of, kinetic mercantilism where it's money. This is the only thing we should, if you want to look at the relationship between two countries, look at the exchange of resources, that being finance and extraction. What are they providing to each other? That's the rule of 2026.
Well, that was one. Bear with me one sec. So that's why I brought up about that American company that it actually manufactures sunflower oil there in Ukraine. That was hit by Russia. It was targeted.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is I'm asking your opinion. Why do you think that it's going to make a difference that if we're involved with that mining lithium, why do you think that's going to make a difference to Russia? Because unless they make a deal with Putin,
And Putin only makes deals if it helps him personally.
Yeah. Putin's not going to end the war, right?
No.
He's not going to end the war. And there's zero circumstances does Putin end the war. His power is entirely dependent on the war going on. He's committed to a wartime economy. There is no reversal. If they stop fighting, the economy collapses. So he's using it as a tactic, basically, to keep the Americans, like, if working with him is more profitable, the United States will hold out. But the reason I don't think it's going to necessarily matter for Russia. I don't think Russia will ever change. Why it would matter for the United States is if you can you search Dobra for me in there? And I want you to go there. Exactly.
To the right.
It's going to be in Ukraine.
It's part of over by Donetsk.
It's in Donetsk.
Right.
So if you go, just zoom in on Donetsk. But the important thing is I want to show people exactly where it's located, because this is really important when we talk about this. So it should be, let me look it up. Dobra.
I think it's a little bit north and west of Donetsk. It says north. You see where Donetsk is in the middle of the screen?
Right here, yeah.
I think it's just a little bit north of that, but
okay. So if you go to a map of what the occupation looks like, okay, which it's hard to see, but what I can tell you is Kramatorsk is very, very close to the front line. So if they take,
is this it here?
Yes, Dobra, that area.
Yeah.
So Russia is probably, if they were attacking efficiently, if they advanced past Pokrovsk, right? So, and they get through Pokrovsk, Dobra and that region is not necessarily beyond occupation. There was a deal with actually in the earlier war with access to a lithium deposit that was taken by Russia. The United States is fucking desperate, guys. Desperate. They are chomping at the bit for any way out from underneath China's thumb, because China's controls over our input, which we need to build data centers and drones and all the thing that the tech bros on here on Palantalk want to do, is dependent on an alternative supply chain from China. If they secure that here, you will see them pivot to stop Russia from taking that. Because if you look actually at the relationship between Russia and the United States, globally, it's adversarial. What's going on in Ukraine is strictly transactional, because the United States 100%. Is exploiting every option to get around Chinese controls and basically sanctions. Controls is another name for sanctions that's not sanctioned. So that's why I think that you'll see that posture change if we see this confirmed, because they will defend their financial interests, which I think Ukraine knows. I think Zelensky has realized that there is no moral you know,
No,
round with them.
well, he's figured out Trump. That I'm
Yes,
sure.
he has.
You know, he's
Yeah.
figured out Trump. He knows how I don't want to say play Trump, but he knows, what Trump's angle is.
Correct.
And because Trump is so transactional with what he does, if it doesn't involve him making money for himself or for his family, then he's not interested.
Right.
And expand. Can you expand out just a little bit?
Yeah.
I just want everybody to be able to see where it says Rostov on Don and then Mariupol, and then
Yes.
right, Mariupol is more to the right.
Oh, this
Right
one here.
Right. So
Mhm.
that is in the Donetsk Oblast. So that right there is currently under control by
Correct.
by Russia. And what they're doing in that city, because they've leveled certain parts of that city, they're rebuilding the city. And the apartments and the homes that are there that were Ukrainian homes, they're now offering for sale to Russians.
Yes. Nick, I'm sending you a link in our chat. It's to a
Yeah.
map that shows all of these things, but it also shows the occupation. So it'll show you where the front lines are.
Perfect.
So if you click on
Appreciate
that, it'll.
So because of in proximity, when you're looking at that, and you're seeing when Ukraine attacks Russia,
Cool.
By attacking meaning they're sending in drones or they send their missiles, which by the way, they're getting better. They're getting help from Britain that is building a certain missile. What was the name of it? It was a movie from
Are you talking
What,
about the
12 days
interceptor,
in-
the interceptor vehicle that
No.
they're working on with the UK?
well, no, there's a missile that Britain is helping them build.
Shadow Storm,
Uh,
Storm Shadow.
No, it's actually there's another one. I just read it this morning.
Oh,
It's I want to say it's Skyfall, which was a movie.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the reason I bring this up is the stalling tactic that between what Putin is doing. Why is he stalling? On a peace deal, right? And it's all tied to the Russian economy.
Yeah.
And we do talk. It is tied to the Epstein files as well, but on a lesser scale. The Russian economy is on the verge of collapsing. And Putin knows this. He's not going to admit it, but he knows it. So that's why he's pushing his buddy Trump, to try to get Ukraine to agree to some sort of a peace deal to give up parts of Ukraine. Never going to give up parts of Ukraine. It's not going to happen.
No.
But
No.
As long as the longer this draws out, and the fact that Ukraine has developed these long-range weapons, they're going to be able to target different parts of Western Russia. So can you zoom out a little bit on that?
Yep.
Or bring up the other map. I want everybody to see relation to, zoom out a little bit and hold it right there. So you're going to see down at the bottom, of course, you can see where that's Crimea. And then over to the right bottom, it says, I can't even pronounce it, Novor right there. That is another site, another naval base.
Oh, Novosibirsk?
Yes.
The one bottom right?
Right. And then you also have Krasnodar to the right of that. All these areas in here get targeted by Ukraine's long range. Why is that? Because in here is where there's the supply chain comes from. Supply chain comes down from Russia further up and then flows down through here in order for it to come across the bridge into Crimea, which then they funnel up into up towards Mariupol and other areas. So you have, that's the reason why Putin realizes it's just a matter of time, because the more that Ukraine attacks refineries, they're also attacking not civilians, and that's a huge difference between what Russia does and Ukraine does. They don't attack civilians, but they're targeting all the infrastructure and everything that is tied to the production of oil, and also production of weapons that they're building in Russia. Also, they're targeting parts even deeper into Russia, further north, so where you have the Ukrainians know that the longer that they keep this up, and they're not depending on the United States for this shit. They're doing it themselves, and they're getting help from the EU. And this is why I want people to understand when they say, "Well, what is the EU doing? What are they doing?" Read
Everything.
everything.
Everything. That's absolutely everything. We haven't given them shit for months. They froze all the fucking weapons shipments to Ukraine. Like, we haven't done shit. The fact, to be honest with you, the fact that they care about us at all, the fact that they're negotiating with them is entirely, I think, to a degree, to stop them from just getting in bed with Russia. I really do. I really think that a part of the reason these conversations are going on and the mind games behind giving them access to a deposit that's right behind the front line is not lost on me either. As we're sitting here, it's to get U.S. support back in the game.
Yes.
It's what it is. And I want to point out, you pointed out three great things. Particularly, it was that that those two areas in the bottom right. So
where the base was.
Right. So
Yeah.
two things that are important, I think, about Russia. One is they are still extremely dependent. Novosibirsk, thank you. So it is still dependent, heavily dependent on the Soviet Union's rail lines. So everything in Russia runs by fucking train, old ass trains that they still have going because they have not technologically advanced in Russia, despite what they want you to believe. Like, I saw a great video. They were unpacking this Oreshnik missile, and they pulled the gyro out of this thing, and it was as big as like my head. Right? The gyros they use now, they're laser gyros. They're small. The computer chips in these things were like the size of, Shrek's hand. Like, this is old tech. And so by hitting this oil, by hitting particularly that, Novosibirsk down there in the bottom right, that was the second, I believe it's the second largest oil loading and unloading port that Russia has access to. So it's this, like what Cheech is saying, he's talking about this wider picture, but I also think we can also look at the larger relationships, particular what's to gain, right? What's to gain when Russia collapses? Well, oil. Who's producing and who is the global producer and provider of oil? The United States has the highest domestic production of oil, and it would fill it with the collapse of Russia would create a void in who can be the primary producer. Not to mention, they won't be able to get their capacity back online in the amount of time. This is all very, what I think 2026, we have to throw everything we think about the world's order, who provides what, who is the dominant resource. Right now, Russia owes China everything. The fact that its economy exists at all is entirely dependent on Xi Jinping's generosity. You go ahead.
Right? We talk about transactional. Transactional. So just a point. So when back it was in the like 1997, 98, 99, in that area where you see Sevastopol, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a conversation between Russia and Ukrainians about splitting up the naval fleet that was there. A certain portion of that was supposed to go to Russia. A certain portion of that was going to go back to the Ukrainian Navy. And what do you think that Russia tied paying the bill to? Gas. Mm-hmm. Because they had a gas debt. So they said, okay, we're going to write off your gas debt, but we're only going to give you a quarter of the fleet. We're going to take the rest. And the ships that they gave Ukraine, we're just scrap metal. I mean, literally. So, it's all transactional for them. So you were also talking about, the oil loading facilities. So the shadow fleet that Russia has, and we're seeing this now, how that's playing out, where what's the real reason did we chase that tanker all the way from the Caribbean all the way up to almost into it was up in the Baltic. It was in the North Baltic where they caught this thing. Why was that? Was it because Trump wanted to prove a point, or was it because the oil that was on there that was bound for Russia?
I wonder if this deal on the minerals was signed. I wonder if I would love to see the timeline, because whenever any of these things happens, okay, I asked myself, what was signed in the last fucking week about who made money in the last week? Because what we're seeing is the United States military operating as a transactional business enforcement agency, right? They're using the military to leverage relationships with other countries. In the first administration, it was more clout and kind of diplomatic pressure. We have evolved at this state in the fascist states of America. At this point, the fascist states of America on a global stage is using its military to make the government. And when I say the government, I don't mean the federal government. I mean the people in government money. That is what their primary objective is. It's that simple. And this is like one of those things where it's like the seizure of that tanker. And I honestly suspect that this deal was probably in its final stages because they wouldn't have seized that tanker 4 months ago, when the discussion was about getting Ukraine to capitulate and splitting, the nuclear power. Because before the discussion before this was the demilitarized special economic zone, which was the idea was to split up Donetsk, give them access to the same deposits they're signing for with Ukraine, okay, and then also use the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's another.
So that was a thing. But now looks like they're pivoting back to Ukraine, because it's about how can they get this shit the fastest. That's it. That's all that matters.
That's why Putin knows he's limited. He's on borrowed time. He understands his economy is going in the tank, and if that happens, they're done. He's going to continue to try to fight to continue the war, and the only way he can do that is to print money. That's it. It's the only way he can do that. And right now, I think that the ruble is well, it's not where it was. I don't know what the value of the ruble is to the U.S. dollar, but the fact is that they're running out of money, and they have bankruptcies that are happening in
they're
Russia.
selling their gold from their treasury, I believe. They're straight up selling gold bars, right? That's how you know it's bad, when they're selling the gold bars out of the national treasury.
So this is how they're controlling. I'm going to circle back to. I saw a video. It was they interviewed a Russian woman. She looked like she was in her 60s, 70s, and she's collecting her pension. And they asked, how are you doing? She says, I'm doing good. She says, as long I'm getting my pension now, consistently every month, better than it was before. Better than it was before. And then they put how much her pension was each month. They could guess.
$80.
Yeah, a little bit more than that, but you're not. I
was going to say like 100, maybe 150.
Exactly. How can you survive on $150 a month retirement? Now, looking at this woman, she was well dressed. How's that happen? But that's my point, is that now you have the aging. The majority of the older Russians that are there are depending on a pension to receive from the government, from Putin. The war economy is based off of the production that they're getting when they're building the weapons. So these people are not out of work. What's going to happen if all of a sudden they don't have let's just use the what if scenario. Now they've decided to have a peace deal, and now you have all these soldiers that are going to come back into Russia. What's going to happen?
The economy is going to be flooded with labor and with mental health issues and suicide. Yeah, but it's going to be flooded even more because soldiers returning home
they better
aren't healthy. And to answer you made a,
Yeah,
or you asked about the conversion rate.
yeah.
Currently, it's $1 is equal to 77.82 Russian rubles, which means 150 US dollars is roughly 11,674 rubles a month, which might sound like a lot, but again, it's 150 bucks. You can't even buy like 2 days worth of groceries in the US anymore for almost that much money. Like that's what they're asking retired folks to live off of.
So I'm
And it's
sure
going to get worse when the economy gets
it's
flooded with people.
it's going in that direction where they're already uh, they're scrambling. They can't take. There's a certain amount of money that they can take out of banks, and they've limited that amount too. So they can't get a run on the Russian banks, so that they can't take their money out. Um,
So, question for you, Cheech,
yeah,
because one of the things I know about Russian history specifically is on their war front side is they tend to be very aggressive about just throwing people into the slaughter. Like they are willing to throw peons and little folks and millions of them out to die.
they've
Let's
always
say,
done that.
yeah,
Always.
and that's their war philosophy is just throw every person all the time as many. How do you think that's going to, like, assuming something pops blows off and somebody attacks somebody or a spillover happens and it does escalate, say the US invades Greenland and everybody in Europe is distracted because the US has now invaded Greenland and we have broken the NATO treaty and Article 5 is issued. Putin will take that as an advantage to then do something like we were talking about earlier, which is I'll move the map up towards it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Remote is they'll go
it's going to be the
in
Baltic.
this area.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's going
So
to be the Baltic. They're already prepping for that. Like I said, it's not going to be. They won't be surprised because they know that that's
yeah,
where they will be targeted. And the first place that it'll happen at is going to be right at that gap that you were talking about, Shane.
Yes.
They're going to cut that gap off, and if they cut the gap off, now Poland, they're going to separate the Baltic states from the rest of the EU.
Yeah.
they basically need that area.
Yes.
They don't
just
need that
need two
much.
regions.
That's the important thing you're pointing out, Nick, is they don't need that much territory. They don't
two.
need that much because what they'll do is they'll put 20, 30,000 guys with Kalashnikovs in that spot. And then it's like the question again, it is like you have this coalition of the willing, you have NATO that's not NATO anymore. What I think is different in this scenario, one of the things that was successful under Biden was bringing Finland and Sweden into NATO. That changes the situation, particularly for the Baltics. They can receive, particularly from Sweden, who has Gripens, which are some of the best fighter jets in the world. And they can operate. There is an island. You see it right there, actually, in the middle of the Baltic Sea. It's their Stockholm, and then you zoom in on that island. Yep, that's the one. You zoom in there.
Big one.
Yep, they call that like the floating aircraft carrier, and it's got nothing on it but a bunch of Swedish, weapons. It's basically a forward airfield that they can use. Russia has been consistently, using cutting the cables and the infrastructure that connects that island between and these kind of things. Because Sweden and Finland in particular, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, is part of the Russian Empire. One of the biggest, actually, embarrassments in the history of the Russian Empire was the loss of Finland. So when we think about like Putin's psyche, what would he really, really want? Finland is very much one of those things
that's so when you're looking at the Baltic and you go further up, right? So when the ice forms, they have upward Murmanskas. When the ice forms, there isn't any way that they have access to the Baltic when the ice forms. So the only place that they'll have access to the Baltic is down where Kaliningrad is. That's the
And I'm
only,
just showing off Finland so that
yeah.
people can see, like, Finland would open up if, say, they were to recapture Finland, which is, my guess would be very hard to do. So my question actually to you on all of this is, do you think they actually have the manpower to continue a global war? Because if they were to set off World War III, they, like, if we set off World War III, yes, the US would be part of the axis of assholes, which is what I'm calling it, because that's what we are. We're just an axis of assholes that want to take over
Yeah.
the world. And the axis and the other side is those who like democracy. Coalition of the willing versus the axis of the assholes.
Mm.
I don't personally believe that Russia has the manpower unless it strips all of its friendly neighbors of their personnel, their personnel and
Yeah.
male resources too, and they're going to kill off multiple generations. Do you think they're able to
No, I don't.
sustain a global war?
No, I don't. They'll. So here, that's another reason why I talk. Well, I always talk about Moldova in its proximity to Ukraine and Crimea, right? Because right there, if they were to actually because Moldova is not part of NATO, so for them to go to Moldova, now they have access. They have Odessa. They have the ports on the Black Sea. And then to the left of that is where Romania is, right? And they are NATO. So I just read something this morning, and the Moldova is considering becoming part of Romania.
Mm-hmm.
And if they choose to do that, now they do become part of NATO. Part of NATO. So if Romania falls, you get Moldova, and then Romania, and then to the north of that, you've got Slovenia. You got Poland. I mean, it's all there,
Yeah.
and they will just go north.
Yes.
So to answer your first question, do they have the manpower and the ability to fight this war on a global level? No, I don't. However, I will put in an asterisk there. It depends on what they choose to do with their nuclear facility, that nuclear warheads.
I think so I don't disagree with you, Cheech, but I also don't necessarily agree with you. And it's the reason I say this is it's not that they don't have the manpower, it's that it will collapse Russia. But if Russia, but here's the thing, I think that we assume, we talk about how Trump is not logical, right? He does dumb shit that makes no fucking sense. Make no mistake, Putin is also aware of two things. He's getting old, and he hasn't achieved what he wanted to achieve. His life goal is to recreate the Russian Empire. The second thing is he has not done a large-scale mobilization. I will make an asterisk here. He did sign a mobilization for about 200,000 about a week ago, which is significant. But I also think that he can do it, but once he pulls the trigger, it's a downward spiral. That doesn't mean Europe doesn't have to worry about there will be waves of dudes with AKs and waves of drones, and at that point it's a race between internal collapse of Russia and how much they can grab. If they can get enough, it still won't save it, but they might be able to extract resources to extend the lifetime. But I think,
in my opinion, so first off, where are they going to get the manpower from? So Russia's freaking huge, right? I mean, you take a look at that, and then you start seeing what's in the far eastern Russia when you get into Siberia, and then closer over towards, right? And it's huge. So they're already pulling people.
This continues for a really long.
Yeah, they're already pulling people from
fun
far.
Fact, half of that is so irradiated, no one can live there.
Yes. I like how it's just called Jewish region.
What the hell?
What the hell? This doesn't. I don't know.
Why is the name of it?
The Jewish
Jewish region.
Yeah, how about that?
I guess there's a lot of Jewish people over there.
You know what also I think is interesting, and I don't know what your take is on this.
I thought we got run out of Russia.
Especially in Eastern, China, where those areas that border China, you have this interesting dynamic where you have a lot of Chinese nationals that have come over the border. And it's like a convenient thing they both kind of ignore. But, the more China has an interest in keeping all the bikes, for example, that you see them doing they ride in on ATVs and motorcycles and all this crazy shit. They all come from China in bulk. Like China is allowing them to actually prosecute the war in any capacity because this new strategy of putting 10 guys on motorcycles, they haul ass up there, ditch the bikes in the grass, and hide in a basement for like a fucking week. That's literally what they're doing. My thing here is, I think that if Russia collapses, China is going to
move
up. Right. And so, because they've already ceded that ground, there's tons of Chinese nationals. They can be like, oh, the people there want to become part of China. I really think that the conversation behind closed doors of Putin is, how is the world behind the world powers, okay, that are on the other side, is how is the world going to divvy up Russia? What do we do with Russia? Right. Because it's going to go.
But that's also a conversation that the EU also is very aware of. Did you know that right after Germany fell, when Hitler, after he committed suicide and they surrendered, that Britain actually had wanted to invade Russia. They had put together a plan.
Yep.
To go into Russia. And it's like I had no idea that was something that was planned. They were willing to do it.
Yeah, in the Arctic in particular, it's interesting because I think that one of the things is I've been trying to figure this out is, we need to figure out these people's motivations. What is really motivating them? Because we know that China is not supporting Russia because, they are supporting another dictator. No, they're supporting Russia because, one, Russia's giving them, they can extort Russia. Okay. They can charge Russia more money for things, and Russia doesn't have an alternative.
Right.
Number one. Two, they need oil. And they're making deals, the pipelines and things in the east that are between China and Russia are relatively hard for them to hit. So those very far away refineries, they're still getting oil to China. And, the whole thing is, a war in Europe weakens Europe. This, regardless of what happens. And look, the German intelligence is saying it's going to happen in 2026 to 2027. Some of the best intelligence in the world, the Swedish, some of the Estonians and the Baltic states, their intelligence is saying 2026, 2027. They make a point to be good at intelligence because they don't have a good army. So they're really, really good at intel. I will go as far as to say that this will happen. It's part of Russia's collapse. It's part of an empire collapsing. Part of that is the last gasp. Part of that is what we're seeing with America, our violence, our imperialism. This is our last gasp. We are looking at two of the world powers who have been fighting each other for since the end of the Cold War.
No, since World War II.
Post World War II, the global order, collapsing simultaneously, both in complete denial of the fact that they're collapsing, leveraging military power because they're, so it's like there's that wild card. But I do think that, to your point, they won't win. You, me, everyone under the sea knows they're not going to win. They'll hurt.
So Putin's goal is to extend it. He doesn't want the war. What he's hoping for will never happen.
Yes.
One, of course, capitulation. I know enough Ukrainians to tell you there's no effing way that they're going to say they're going to give anything up. Zelensky's the same way, and he's listening. And I pause when I say that because he knows that if he plays Trump's game, Donnie 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, it's buying Ukraine time. Yes, Ukrainians are paying the price, where they're hitting the shit out of Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, some of these areas where now the civilians are hurt, are in a big hurt. I read something this morning and I shared it on my Substack. It was a gentleman that was traveling via train from Poland into Kyiv, and they were crossing the border into Ukraine, and there was a bomb threat on the train. So they had to stop the train in a little small part of Ukraine. It's a very small town. Now, the train is loaded with passengers. So everybody had to get off the train, and they went to where what we would call a terminal. And the Ukrainians that were there came out. They opened up a pizza shop so they could make pizza. They opened up a cafe where they could make coffee in hot. They made sure that these people had plenty of heat in order to wait out while this train was getting gone through the bomb threat. And you think about that with the resolve that they have, that they're willing to step forward at the time that they need to, right? To step up and provide support and help.
Yeah.
This just exemplifies, the Ukrainian culture on what they're all about, right? And the only thing that I can compare this to is in Britain, when Churchill, he actually rode the underground train, prior to making a decision of telling Hitler to go F himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked the Britons on the train, will you ever give up? And their answer was never.
And so he did it.
Never.
So he did it.
And that's what what made him made that decision. So yeah. Zelensky's hearing those same words from the Ukrainian people.
You know what's interesting? Sorry, go ahead. Go finish.
That's what I had to say.
Yeah. So you know what's interesting is you and me, Cheech, and Nick to a degree. I think we've all been watching Ukraine. People like you and me in particular, Cheech, who are watching it under a magnifying glass. Checking in every day, watching the front lines. I've noticed a distinct pivot in probably the last 3 weeks in the operational success and the military, the Ukrainians' national armed forces, in their ability to really conduct operations and making the right decision for those first, 3 years. I mean, like the 2023 offensive. If you guys haven't watched the documentary 2,000 meters to Andriivka, you need to go watch it. Number one, because I have never seen something that better exemplified the waste and the mismanagement. I do that every time when I talk my hands. And the mismanagement of resources.
Yeah.
Like that shows that there was, an entire generation of 20, guys under 25 who volunteered in that 2023, and their bodies littered fields that were taken back from Russia in a matter of weeks. Mm-hmm. And then we saw this long period of, and I don't know if this is Syrskyi, who's a Russian general, who's fucking Russian, who's in charge of the Ukrainian armed forces, and he fights like a Russian. But with the recent changes, when he got rid of the guy's an asshole, but he kicked out his presidential, they kicked him out. He went around, he talked to the military. You've seen a change in like Kupiansk was, guys, I cannot highlight how fantastic that operation was. They took an entire city. They took like a year's worth of Russian advance paid in thousands and thousands of bodies. And they took that city back, all of it. And it was run by the guy who had been formerly the commander of the ground forces in Ukraine.
Mhm.
You're starting to see a push from the lower levels demanding better leadership on a high level because they're seeing their lives wasted. What I'm seeing is a Ukraine that is fighting smarter, that is valuing the lives of their troops even more. Like they pulled out of Munirad, right? Which, you know, they've done a couple times. Sierski's done this where he leaves troops in forward positions because he has this no backward step mentality.
Yep.
And soldiers are executed as POWs. We saw it happen several times actually in Munirad. But I think that whatever this pivot is, the key thing about this war is that the leadership of Russia, if Russia's leadership was competent, if their military wasn't so fucking rotten, if the regimental leaders weren't selling the shoes off their troops' feet for a couple bucks, then Russia would have won. There's a distinction between the quality of the troops, of leadership, of the will of these people to be there. And it's because Russia is the way Russia is, and Ukraine is willing to fight the way it's fighting. And the smarter they get, if this is the leadership we're seeing, the way they're striking Russia, the way that they've done all this without U.S. support. We've done nothing for them in this year.
To your point, 2014. So keep in mind that Ukraine has been fighting the Russians in the Donbass region since 2014. So they've had experience, firsthand experience on how Russia will operate. So that gave them an advantage that over time they were able to use. Now, also what happened up in Kyiv, where they came across, they thought they could steamroll into Kyiv, right? And what ended up happening, they had to turn around and they had to go back. And that whole highway with all these tanks and supplies from Russia.
I watched those videos, man. It was like, I made my day, dude, to see that. And you know what it was, dude? I'm pretty sure they sold all their fucking gas while they were sitting there. So all of these guys, they went and were like, oh, it'll be easy. We're not going to have, and so they didn't even they had barely enough gas. And then the commanders did what they always did. And they parceled off, 10, 15% to put in their pocket.
Yeah.
And then they ran out of gas. We were talking about this beforehand, how you're seeing African fighters, so many African fighters. And I think this is one of the ways that Putin has been able to stave off a mobilization. We saw him do it with the North Koreans. We've seen him do it with a lot of Chinese nationals. Okay. You see people from Myanmar, Bangladesh, and now Africa. You're seeing a lot of African mercenaries. There is an abundance of Africans right now because no one's talking about just how fucked up the African continent is right now. But let me assure you guys, everyone's trying to kill each other in Africa. It's bad. Like the people in Ukraine, and I say this not to be insensitive to the people of Ukraine, they have it better in Kiev than they do in El Fashar in Sudan. Okay. Like they have it better than they do in the DRC right now, because in Ukraine, it's a war between two sides. In Africa, you're looking at basically just militias coming in your village, massacring everyone, raping everyone, and executing all the young men. It's like that everywhere. So these people in Africa, they want to get the fuck out of Africa. So when you get offered a Russian passport and they say all you got to do is come and fight in Ukraine and you'll be a millionaire, there's no shortage of people willing to do that.
Yeah, as long as they don't know. As long as they don't realize they're going to get a mine strapped to their chest.
Exactly. But they also don't speak Russian, right? No. And there's these videos like that of the Russian handlers, if you will, that take these guys in groups of 20, 30 up to the front line. And this video I saw was just like, it's like chilling because they're singing. There's like 20 guys and they're in the winter. These guys have probably never even seen snow. And they're all sitting there and they're singing, one of their probably like an ethnic song that belongs to their group. This little community. And they're like, all smiling. And this guy who's in Russian and he translated, he's like, these dogs are getting ready to go die. Like, I mean, they view them as trash. I mean, like they're
That's
but this is how they do it.
that's
They
their
just
culture, dude. I'm telling you that it's the way they are, and I'm not saying that all Russians are that way. However, that this is their culture. It's been their it's in their DNA. I mean, I know that sounds like I'm being very insensitive, but the fact is that this is the way it's been forever. And I'm not saying that they can't change. I'm just saying that this is the way Russian life is. When you're in Russia and everything is filtered. I mean, you're not getting that outside information. They don't have the ability to get what's going on outside of Russia. The younger generations do, because they're smart enough to use a VPN, and they're outlawing VPNs. I mean, outlawing VPNs in Russia. So now, what are their options? And early on, you had a lot of Russians that were leaving Russia and going to other countries. I know somebody that said to me, there was in St. Petersburg, and she said, I can leave anytime I want. I can go over to Finland. And I was like, interesting. But anyway, as we come full circle to how Ukraine ties into what's going to happen, I'm just going to say this: we're fighting for our democracy here in the United States, and if we let Ukraine, if we let Russia, if we let Putin take Ukraine, you won't have a democracy here, a chance of getting a democracy winning here in the United States, because you have somebody at the top that's being controlled by the Stephen Millers. He knows, right? And where are we going? First place we have to stop. And I'm going to repeat what Lev says all the time. You have to bring out the Epstein files. Why do I keep saying Epstein files? Because everything's tied to the Epstein files. It
brings them all down. It brings everyone down.
Not only that, but also in Russia, right? So do you remember? I read this morning. The first time that Trump was in Russia was in 1997. He was invited to Russia, and it was Ivana was at the time, I think it was his wife. She's Czechoslovakian. And what I'm saying is that they realized that he was who they needed.
Yeah,
they knew it. They knew it then.
Mm-hmm.
KGB had targeted him. What was his weakness? We all know what his weaknesses are.
Yeah,
money, women, and money.
And Russia is the pipeline for it.
And they knew if we get him, now we have somebody in the United States. And I think, who was it that said it? That when Trump won the election in 2016, yes, but in 2024, Putin, they congratulated him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why is that? We all know the reason why.
Yeah.
So how does the Epstein files tie into it? Bring out the Epstein files, and now we're going to connect. The dots will be fully connected.
Listening to Zev Shalev enough too, there's connections there. We know that there's Russian money laundering into, say, the Palm Beach mansion.
All of it.
That I still have questions for Michael Cohen around on. Does he know anything more? What is his involvement? Why did he say he led that financial transaction, and then say that there's no Russian involvement and there was no Russian mobsters or oligarchs involved, when that's clearly a lie, because this is just to normalize relations from Russia back into the global sense so that they can rebuild the Russian Empire. Because if they get into America, then they have an outlet that will help support their economy in a way that they didn't have before.
So Politico did an article November 19th of 2017. It's called The Hidden History of Trump's First Trip to Moscow. You should read that. Search for it. It's on Political magazine in the history department. The Hidden History of Trump's First Trip to Moscow. Read it.
You know, I think we, you know, looks like we're coming to a close here. And I think the last thing I want to say is, as I look at this, and I've seen, the statement of JD Vance talking about how fucking this guy has immunity because he's in the federal government. Look, guys, in Russia, the fucking police can shoot someone in the fucking face and absolutely nothing happens. Okay, look, if and to be honest with you guys, I don't have a lot of fucking faith in anything these days other than the people of this country, just to be clear. And I would not be surprised if this guy gets immunity. But just to be clear, if they give this man immunity to shoot a woman in the face, you have 1,000 ICE agents heading to Minneapolis. You think I'm fucking serious when I say I could see a massacre. We could see a Boston Square massacre. Okay, like muskets lined up, and what, like, you know, I'm nervous this week. I haven't been, you know, nervous, but coming into this week, I'm fucking nervous, everybody, and I'm saying this because I'm being candid. I think that we could be hitting the point where they're going to start just fucking shooting people, because this was opportunistic. I don't think he did this, you know, on purpose. Like, I don't think they planned this, but I also think that they know what's around the corner in 2026. And if people are afraid of getting shot in the fucking face, it'll probably be easier for them to deal with all of the fallout of things. If they're going to do it,
they're going to do it.
Fucking time.
So I also read something that the majority of these guys are Proud Boys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Or Proud.
That wouldn't surprise me on any statistic.
You know, and you're talking about surprises. I also saw that there was a GoFundMe for this guy.
There is. And he's raised quite a lot of money too.
Collected like $174,000, and it's like, and I say to myself, Cheech, you can no longer be surprised. But I'm going to be honest, I was fucking shocked, right? And it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I think I want to challenge you though, Shane, just on that last statement, cutting in on you, Cheech, here is, I think they did plan it.
Yeah.
Did they plan to kill Renee Nicole Good herself? No. In fact, they're probably less happy about the fact that they killed a white woman first like this, because their last person who was shot up in a car was a Hispanic woman, I believe, who got shot 7 fucking times and is lucky to be alive. But they killed a white woman. They didn't want to do that first, but this was planned. This is a plan, not by this person, Jonathan Ross, is going to go out and be the one who murders someone and executes them first. It's, we're going to create the environment that specifically enables these men to get out their frustration and their little and their tininess by shooting somebody. And they're giving them the free reign. And I'm actually going to be talking to former DHS agent Jen Budd this afternoon.
Oh, yeah, nice.
About the culture of DHS and the green light to kill, because that's what they've been given, is a green light to kill people. If this man gets away with literal murder, which we saw, all of us, first fucking hand, if he gets away with murder, more is coming quickly.
If he gets away with murder, everyone needs to take a serious look inward and decide what the fuck you want to do. Like that's all I'm going to say. You need to, because like everyone needs to take a serious look inward and decide what the fuck we're going to do. And that's up to you. I'm not here to tell you one thing or the other. I've had to have these thoughts recently, the thoughts I didn't want to fucking have. But we're here. So look, like with this, I agree with you. I think that actually maybe I amended to, they had a contingency for this. They knew it was an inevitable outcome of the environment that they created, and they were prepared for it and to take advantage of it. And so, you know, I just really don't know. I mean, like I trust people like you and you know, Sherrod at Center America and Zev and everyone in our circle that covers domestic politics, because to be honest with you guys, you know me, I'm very emotional, and like I know what's going on, but like it is I like until I need to fucking be here and be fucking looking at this shit like we're doing something, whatever that is, I'm ready for that. But until then, I can't live on this. You know, you've talked about this. It's like the moment before you go into combat is the longest moment, and then you're there. But that I can't live in that moment. Like I can't. No, I physically cannot, which is why I've pivoted my contribution to large scale understanding and things like that, so I can be productive and like not go into a manic episode, because I'm watching people get abducted and murdered all around me. But like, this is one of those things that makes me feel like I need to come back. And I don't like that, because I had set very firm, like really fucked shit is happening boundaries to return to this realm. And that's really scary for me right now.
You don't have to return to it right now. We need you focused with like Cheech and the few others who are very hyper focused on it, to stay focused on Ukraine and specific global events and like European, African, and Asian events that are going on, because the rest of us got it. I can manage domestic events. Dean can manage domestic events. Lev can manage domestic and global events. Zev can manage domestic with Ellie and others, and Melissa Corrigan. We got this. You stay your lane. Like we say in the military, watch your lane. So everybody's going to watch our lanes. Our lanes overlap, which is why Shane and I are such good, like so easy to get along with, is our lanes of focus, one, overlap. Two, our lanes of interest and energy that we want to put in overlap. And that's important. And so don't downplay the contribution that you're making, because like Courtney just said, divide and conquer. Don't be a jack of all trades where you're a master of none. Be a master of one or two right now. We need people who are excellent in one or two areas, who are excellent at a couple things that they do. And so as we break to the end of the top of our hour and a half, I want to give Cheech you some time here to sell yourself, and then Shane and I will sell ourselves as always. But I want you to sell yourself because you have a lane too, and I want you to let people know sort of like what your plans are this year, of what you're going to be doing and how you're action focused and what your focus is.
So I'll tell you, my plan actually started a long ass time ago. It wasn't just something that was on the fly. My plan was the war's been 4 years. Coming up February 24th, I'll keep repeating that. That's when we're going to have the 4-year anniversary. But it started probably in the July of 2022 of my plan going to Ukraine. We talk about certain things, shit that gets in the way, things that happen, where you always have to. There's a priority that always will move to the top, and it's just part of everyday life, right? So for me, it's my goal is, which I'm very close to getting there, is to be in Ukraine, and that's going to happen. I already know, there's a date range of when I'll have the visa, have an understanding of the difficulty of getting the visa to get into Ukraine. It's not something where I can just take my passport and cross the border into Ukraine. You can't effing do it.
Yeah.
I've asked, and I was told, if you come into this country illegally, you'll never come back. And I can't do that. So that's why I have to wait for the visa. The visa is going to happen. I anticipate shortly after Valentine's Day.
Nice.
is to have the visa. When I have that visa, I'm on my way. I'm going to be on the flight, to Moldova, Chisinau, and then she's going to pick me up there, and I'll be in Ukraine. Once I get in Ukraine, once I'm in Odessa, get settled, I'll be there for 3 weeks initially. 3 weeks. I'm going to touch base with Alexander and whomever else that's part of his team, so that we can try to coordinate on getting health supplies into Odessa. At least I'll be there. Alexander says, great. I'll make sure that we can ship those to you there, so that you can coordinate with local authorities there to hand things out. Generators, very important. We still need to get generators. Unfortunately, the only ones that we can get at this point are petrol, gas. However, we still need generators. So donate the generators. For me personally, subscribe to me, become a paid subscriber. I've said this before. If you become a paid subscriber, I donate 100% of whatever I get on my Substack to Ukraine. 100%.
That's awesome.
And it's not
That's
about,
awesome.
and I want to say this, it's not about the me, it's about the we. It's about the we, because that's what it takes. These two guys are awesome. Make sure that you subscribe, become a paid subscriber, support both of them. When I'm overseas, once I'm in Odessa, I'm going live on Substack. It's going to be part of what I do there to make sure that I can show everybody the real Odessa. Yes, I'm going to show you the areas that have been hit, but if they allow me to, there's limitations to where they'll let me go. However, I want to show you Odessa itself. Why does Putin want Odessa? I'll tell you why. It's money. Okay. So last thing I'm going to say is, if you want to learn about Russia, War and Punishment, Mikhail Zygar. This is one. Get it, read it. It'll help explain a lot. Number 2, Bloodlands by Timothy Snyder. And a gentleman that started reading this morning sent me a message, sent me a note, a DM, and he said it was the most difficult first chapter of a book that he's ever had to read. And this says why. Between Europe, Hitler, and Stalin. The next one, the last one, is War by Bob Woodward. This helps connect the dots from the past to now. You'll see the players that are on here. You see them on here. They're all in here. Read it.
Yep.
And then, of course, shadow diplomacy.
Yes, of course.
Yep.
And all of this will help give you some insight as to why I'm so passionate about Ukraine, along with these other two gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cheech. I appreciate that a lot. And please subscribe to Cheech. I saw 2 people scan the QR code when I put it up. Thank you so much. Also hit the subscribe button in the top left corner if you're on Substack. That way you can freely subscribe to all of us. We'll do a quick snap one for Shane and I for these ones. We'll do a little short for us. Shane, go ahead, my brother.
Yeah. So guys, like Cheech, 2026, we have goals, we have objectives here at the Firebrand Project. Big focus on geopolitical events, global coverage, big picture stuff. We want to make sure we understand what our foreign policy is doing, and also how events in foreign countries affect our foreign policy and do affect you, right? So big thing is your geopolitics. A war in Cambodia absolutely affects the price of your phone, your fridge, anything like that. It really matters. It's important that we understand as Americans what to do. The other big thing we're working on right now, and I'm excited, I'm bringing Kat on. If you guys know Kat, she's fantastic. Kat is going to come on. She's going to be an analyst here at the think tank. She's going to work with me to cover more of those things so that I can start to pivot and focus more on the report. And we have someone on board who can really do that deep research into all of these things, who's on that same wavelength, and being able to put our minds together, I think is going to be really remarkable. So if you want to get to a point where we can see more analysts, Kat is volunteering her time. I cannot pay her. I would like to pay her. So to do that, become a paid subscriber. As soon as I am able to be profitable, then I can pay her. And that's what I really want to do. I want to pay people to come on board and do things together. So that's a good reason to come over, subscribe, be a paid subscriber. It goes into building something bigger than me, something that I think can really be important going forward. So come on over and help us out.
Thanks, brother. Sorry about that little flipperoo there on our
subscribe
QR
to
code. Come subscribe to me at Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm focusing a lot on masculinity issues there, and mental health and community building, because there's a fucking lot of it, and chronic illness, and we need to talk about those things. And there's some really cool stuff. We have some really good discussions, but also we're hitting white supremacy hard this year. Like, that's our goal on Sick of This Shit Publications, is to fucking break white supremacy, because that shit sucks. It hurts everybody and nobody likes it in the long run. Like, fuck that. Let's do some better things in the future. And then finally, come support Banner and Backbone, because this is the civic platform. This is where we're going to be doing all of the hosting for so many good things. Like, where we've got so many good projects ongoing right now already at Banner and Backbone, with Palantalk, with Powerful Voices, the Window of Discussion, the Rant Act, Anti-Fascist Book Club. We want more. We're going to be doing more too. We're going to be bringing as much as we can. A lot of it is going to be focused on this epistemic warfare and fighting back against the tech fascism and the propaganda machine. And we're going to be the anti-propaganda machine. We're going to be blasting the truth on repeat, loudly. We're going to be flooding the zone for democracy, and we're going to be flooding the zone, hopefully, with support for actionable items that can be legislative ideas that can make a real impact in the US on the ground, and show people what we're actually for as citizens, and force our politicians to follow suit. And if they don't, fuck them. Get them out of there. Because like Shane and Cheech have said at this point too, is something is happening. It's coming. We all know it's coming. We all know that there's something bad on the horizon, unless we do something now as a community. And that's build our community. We may not be able to stop it from happening, but we can lessen it. We can prevent the worst of the disasters and then break through. Because when they fail, we will win. And we have to have a plan to get there. Banner and Backbone is going to help us do that. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Cheech, for joining us. This has been an incredibly insightful episode. I'll even drop the link for the deep state map into the post show notes, so people can bookmark it if they want. Thank you for sharing that resource. I think having these types of resources are super important, so that everybody can investigate on their own and do a little bit of research and fucking win this fight, because it's that easy. Well, it's not that easy, but it starts there. Knowledge is power, and then actioning on that knowledge wins this fight. So let's go action on some knowledge, because here at Palantalk on Banner and Backbone, we like tech, we like freedom, we like dignity, but we don't like fascism.
No fascism.
So, tech, no fascism here. Let's go have a great afternoon, everyone. There's a lot of good stuff that we're all working on. Keep up strong, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, y'all.